Why is it having less sugar? It means that the concentration water is more inside, or rather the tea is more. The water, milk, and let's say the cocoa, if you want to make a beverage, is more as compared to sugar you are putting inside your cup. How about when you add sugar? When you add sugar, you realize that it is now sweet. The beverage is now sweet. So why is it becoming sweet? It means the concentration has been added and therefore it is high. So just the same way, by the time we added potassium manganate 7, we believe that potassium manganate 7 has a high concentration. But when it lands, or it landed within the liquid, that is water, it began to spread. It began to do what? To spread. Now it is spreading. From where it is high, the particles. Remember, what is spreading is the particles. Now the particles are spreading. They spread from where they're high. Initially where they're put. Inside the water. And remember, water always lowers the concentration. I want you to understand that. It lowers the concentration. So the particles move from where the concentration is high to where the concentration is low. Yes. Now, let's see what is the observation. What is the observation? What is the observation? Yes, that is the procedure, remember. What is the observation? Now, procedure 1, I talked about you have to fill the beaker halfway with clean water, and then you follow by dropping the particles of potassium manganate 7. You drop them using a spatula spoon, or rather you can use a tube, glass tube, and then from there, observe what happens. So you realize that the particles begin to spread. Even if you leave it for some time, it will now completely spread throughout the container, or throughout the beaker, or rather the glass. That is what we call diffusion. So observation. Observation is what you see. What you see. In science, you can observe using the eye. You can observe using a magnifying lens or hand lens as one of them. Or you can use a microscope. You can observe using the eye. Those organisms or those specimens that are very myopic, that are very small, they cannot be seen by naked eyes. You can use a microscope or rather a hand lens. So all these two are used to enlarge the object, the image. Now, observation. What are we going to observe? Now, you are going to observe this. The particles of potassium manganate 7 spread throughout the water. Yes, that is what we are going to observe. We're going to see the particles of potassium manganate 7 moving. They are moving. Yes, they spread all over the water. That is what we are going to observe. And then explanation. The particles move from their region of high concentration to their region of low concentration. A process called diffusion. A process called diffusion. So they move from their region of high concentration to their region of low concentration, a process we refer to as diffusion. Now, what is this diffusion? Diffusion is therefore, remember to always check the spellings well. Diffusion is therefore, refers to movement of particles from their region of high concentration to their region of low concentration. Now, that is the meaning of diffusion. The particles move from an area where they are highly concentrated, or from a region where they are highly concentrated to a region where they are lowly concentrated. That is what we call diffusion. So you can as well talk about region, or you can talk about area. So they move from their area where they are highly concentrated to their area where they are lowly concentrated. That is what we call diffusion. You will see that the particles of potassium manganate 7, once you drop them in water, where they have been dropped, the concentration is too high. But when it begins to spread, the concentration becomes low. And I told you that water reduces the concentration. That is what we call diffusion. The movement of particles from their region of high concentration to their region of low concentration. I want you to answer me this question. Describe what happens when you drop ink particles in water. Describe what happens. This is quiz C. Describe what happens when you drop ink particles in water. Yes, describe what happens to the ink particles in water. That is quiz C. Yes. Now let's move to the next subtopic. And our next subtopic is a very interesting one. It is purely practical. You have seen that we can do practicals, and we have begun with demonstrating diffusion in liquids. Now back to our next subtopic, that is temporary and permanent changes. Temporary and permanent changes. Yes, temporary and permanent changes. Now we have what is called temporary and permanent changes. You know that something permanent is something that lives forever. It liveth forever. It lives forever. It exists forever. Yes, for a very long time. But temporary is something that ends. Now, we have some changes. Now, we have what is called a change. Now, for instance, you have a milk, changing or turning to be sour. You realize that the milk becomes sour. That is a change. Your mother advises you or tells you to pick some cocoa and you have water. And then you drop the cocoa inside the water. And then you have some sugar inside again. So that is a change. You want to make beverage. You want to make what? Beverage. When you drop the cocoa inside water, there is a change that will happen while you are making a beverage. That is a change. When you again have a rubber and you decide to spread that rubber, you realize that that is a change. So the length, that is a change. That is a change. You heat, let's say you heat anything that is metallic. Anything that is metallic. Let's say you have a knife. You heat a knife. You heat a knife until it turns to be red hot. Red what? Red hot. A knife turning to be red hot. Aye, a lot of heat applied on that knife. So when a knife tarnishes red hot, you cool it later on, you cool it after some time, you realize that that is a change. That is a change. Yes. When you hit a knife, it turns to be red. Very hot. But when you cool it, it goes back to its original color. That is a change. That is what? A change. So we have what is called permanent and temporary changes. Permanent and temporary changes. Let's begin with temporary change. Temporary change. Temporary change. Now, in temporary change, it can be physical. Temporary change, or it can be chemical change. So it can be physical temporary change or chemical temporary change. Remember, physical is something that you're able to see with your eye. So we're going to see some changes, how they happen. And these changes help us in daily life. Yes. Before we move to this physical and chemical change, I want you to do this question for me. Question D. Outline any five examples of changes. Examples of changes. Outline any 5 examples of changes. Otherwise, do this for me. We will meet next time where we will be discussing the temporary changes. We'll have physical and what? And chemical. Before I leave, we have talked about diffusion. And we've said it is the movement of particles from the region of high concentration to the region of low concentration. And another point to note, I hope you are listening. Note that diffusion majorly occurs somewhere here, anywhere. Diffusion majorly occurs in liquids and where? And gases. Yes, in liquid particle and gas particles. And we have talked about changes. I've given some example. You told to prepare some tea or a beverage. You have a cocoa and you have a water there and some sugar. So you make a beverage. Then you have a rubber expanding. You have a knife being heated, turning red hot. Upon cooling, it goes back to its original color. Those are kind of changes. I want you to outline any 5 examples of changes you know. Otherwise, thank you for giving me a listening ear. Bye-bye.